I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Hi, I'm Charles Bethea, the Andrew W. Mellon Director of Collections and Curatorial Affairs at the Chicago History Museum. And today, we take the time to honor and recognize the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. More than 60 years ago, Dr. King was at the forefront of America's civil rights movement. King, along with countless heroic men and women, set out to change a nation by practicing nonviolent strategies that sadly were often met with violence from those who fueled white supremacy and racial segregation. Through marches, peaceful protest, and civil disobedience, African Americans demanded justice and racial equality. We remember Dr. King for his role in this movement. We remember his deeds and his speeches. However, we don't always remember the difficulties and challenges that he and other African Americans faced, not only in the Jim Crow South, but also in urban cities in the North. In January of 1966, Dr. King moved to Chicago, a calculated strategy designed to raise awareness and challenge housing discrimination in urban areas, or as King put it, to eradicate a vicious system which seeks to further colonize thousands of Negroes within a slum environment. This would be one of the first attempts of a Southern civil rights group extending its philosophy of nonviolent tactics in a northern city. As part of the Chicago Freedom Movement, Dr. King addressed a crowd at Soldier Field on July 10th. Following his speech, he led this group of 5,000 to City Hall, where, like his namesake, he posted a list of demands for equality on the front door. 45 years ago, Dr. King fought to change how Blacks and other marginalized groups were treated in this country. And although progress has been made, we still find ourselves fighting some of the same systemic racism and white supremacy that continue to impact the lives of Black and brown people in the 21st century. As you participate in the programs today, which include conversations, art activities, and performances, all honoring Dr. King, brought to you by the Chicago History Museum, let us not only remember the man, but let us remember what he was working for, a nation to rise up and live out its creed that all men are created equal. Thank you and enjoy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for MLK Day 2021, King in Chicago. My name is Julius Jones, and I am an assistant curator at the Chicago History Museum, and I'm here today to take you on a virtual tour of the places and spaces that Dr. King visited during his times in Chicago. The very first place we'll visit on our tour is Rockefeller Memorial Chapel, which is located at the University of Chicago campus at 5850 South Woodlawn Avenue. Gifted to the University of Chicago by its founder, John D. Rockefeller, Rockefeller Memorial Chapel was completed in 1928 and serves as a place for dignitaries from around the world to come and address the university and the city. Dr. King spoke from the pulpit of this church on two occasions. His first appearance took place in April 1956 during the height of the Montgomery bus boycott. The 381-day effort began with Rosa Parks' refusal to give up her seat for a white man and resulted in the desegregation of the city's public transportation system. King spoke to a captive audience of more than 1,500 on the Declaration of Independence and the Negro, sharing his belief in the power of nonviolence to bring about social change. We must use as our weapons the love which transcends everything and can make you compassionate with those who hate you, he said, according to contemporary reports. Our next step is another frequent uh, place that Dr. King spent time at, and that is the home of his friend and gospel icon, Mahalia Jackson. Mahalia Jackson was one of Chicago's most famous residents. Jackson, a contralto, was known as the Queen of Gospel, selling millions of records and performing in venues worldwide. As one of the premier gospel artists in the world, she graciously offered her remarkable voice to the leadership of the civil rights movement, often performing benefit concerts and donating the proceeds to various civil rights organizations. She was also a close friend of Dr. King and his favorite gospel singer. Whenever he was in Chicago, Dr. King was often a guest at her home, and Jackson frequently provided musical accompaniment at his various speaking engagements, including singing I've Been Buked and I've Been Scorned at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in 1963. The two remarkable friends remained close until the end of King's life, with Jackson performing Chicagoan Thomas Dorsey's famous song, Take My Hand, Precious Lord, at Dr. King's funeral in 1968. Next up on the tour is Shiloh Baptist Church, which was located at 6201 South May Street. Dr. King spoke at Shiloh Baptist Church numerous times when in Chicago. It was here that he delivered one of his most famous sermons, A Knock at Midnight, based on the biblical parable in Luke chapter 11, verses 5 through 13. In the sermon, King proclaimed that it was midnight, or a time of deep darkness for America's social and moral order. Yet, despite this darkness, Dr. King used the story to encourage his audience to keep knocking and, by extension, keep working for a new day of justice and equality in the United States. Next up on our tour is Stone Temple Baptist Church, located at 3622 West Douglas Boulevard. Originally built by Romanian Jews as a synagogue for their congregation, this building was purchased by the African American congregation of Stone Temple Baptist Church in 1954. The Ten Commandments in Hebrew at the apex of the roof speak to the church's origins as the first Romanian congregation's synagogue. Dr. King spoke here frequently, due in no small part to the longstanding friendship between his father, the Reverend Martin Luther King Sr., and the church's founder, the Reverend J. M. Stone. When the Chicago Freedom Movement began in earnest, the church served as a key organizing hub. To commemorate Stone Temple's role in the civil rights movement, the church was declared a city landmark in 2016 and has kept the podium from which Martin Luther King spoke in the sanctuary. Next up on our tour is Mount Pisgah Baptist Church, located at 4600 South King Drive here in Chicago. In 1962, Dr. King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference established Operation Breadbasket to demand that businesses located in African American neighborhoods hire members of those communities as employees. When the SCLC launched the Chicago Freedom Movement in 1966, King established a branch here, and its original headquarters was located at Mount Pisgah Baptist Church on a street that now bears King's name. At the time, it was known as South Parkway. King selected a young Chicago Theological Seminary student named Jesse Jackson to lead Operation Breadbasket in Chicago, and later remarked that the effort had become spectacularly successful, opening up 2,000 new jobs to African Americans in Chicago in less than 18 months. The next stop on our tour is 1550 South Hamlin Avenue. To bring attention to the poor housing conditions in Chicago's African American enclaves, King moved his family into an apartment in the city's North Lawndale neighborhood. Located at 1550 South Hamlin Avenue, the rent was $90 a month, expensive for the time, but the building lacked a secure front door and the lobby had a dirt floor. The neighborhood had experienced a complete racial transformation in the previous 10 years, going from 87% white in 1950 to 90% black in 1960. The change led to disinvestment in the community. Jobs disappeared, businesses closed or began stocking inferior products, and landlords neglected their property. In his autobiography, Dr. King wrote, Chicago was not alone among cities with a slum problem, but certainly we knew that slum conditions there were the prototype of those chiefly responsible for the northern urban race problem. The next stop on our tour is Soldier Field, located at 1410 Museum Campus Drive. The Chicago Freedom Movement rally took place on July 10th, 1966, here at Soldier Field, attracting more than 30,000 attendees. The city was in the midst of a heat wave, and there were concerns that this, coupled with the volatile political climate, would lead to violence. Despite the worry, the crowd assembled peacefully to listen to Dr. King speak on the institutionalized discrimination that was taking place in Chicago. He remarked, This day we must declare our own Emancipation Proclamation. This day we must commit ourselves to make any sacrifice necessary to change Chicago. This day we must decide to fill up the jails of Chicago if necessary in order to end the slums. 2 years prior, King spoke at the Illinois Rally for Civil Rights, which was also held here at Soldier Field. Addressing a crowd of nearly 60,000 shortly before Lyndon Johnson signed the 1964 Civil Rights Act, King urged attendees to remain vigilant in seeking justice despite the impending legislative victory. Next on our tour is Chicago City Hall, located at 121 North LaSalle Drive. After the 1966 rally at Soldier Field, Dr. King led a march to City Hall to post the demands of the Chicago Freedom Movement on its door, an act reminiscent of the Protestant Reformation leader Martin Luther, who was his namesake, nailing the 95 treaties to the door of All Saints Church in Wittenberg, Germany in 1517. City Hall was the base of Mayor Richard J. Daley, who had been in office since 1955 and ran Chicago like a machine. Daley was politically astute enough not to play the openly racist foil to King's moral leader, often stating that he agreed with King's critique of slum conditions and supported efforts to hold landlords accountable. Mayor Daley would meet with Dr. King and other civil rights leaders to show his support while simultaneously dragging his feet on implementing and enforcing ordinances to create open housing or to integrate the city's public schools. Next up on our tour is Marquette Park, located at 6743 South Kedzie Avenue. On August 5th, 1966, Dr. King led a march through Marquette Park, an all white neighborhood on Chicago's South Side. He and other activists recognized that discriminatory real estate and rental practices operating in places like Marquette Park allowed realtors to and landlords to prohibit African Americans from moving in. Open housing proponents wanted local and federal officials to aggressively enforce laws requiring that housing be made available without regard to race in neighborhoods like Marquette Park. When marchers arrived in Marquette Park, they were met by 700 counter protesters who threw rocks and bricks and ultimately crossed a police line to attack the demonstrators. King himself was hit in the head with a rock. Afterwards, he remarked, I've been in many demonstrations all across the South, but I can say that I have never seen, even in Mississippi and Alabama, mobs as hostile and as hate filled as I have seen here in Chicago.